Let me just start by saying how meaningful it is to be here, to be given this honor with so many friends, my rabbis and cantors, and lots of people I know here, and particularly Ruth, for you to open up this way. I actually wrote down, you can look at it, before she spoke, "We cannot retreat to the convenience of being overwhelmed," which is a quote I heard from Ruth when I worked for Hillel at University of North Carolina, and it changed my life. I remember thinking about it and really sitting with that and saying, what does that mean, right? I've learned from Ruth that despair is not a strategy. And it can feel really, really hard to move when things are really, really difficult. And so, I stand with you, Ruth, and feel truly honored that you're here. Before I dive into it, let me just say, people saw this from me on Twitter today. It's Star Wars Day today. So spoiler if you've never seen the movies, I watched them for the first time this year. I was surprised at how feminist they were, but I do want to share my one-line observation on this May the 4th be with you day is that if Anakin knew that Padma had access to comprehensive reproductive care and would survive childbirth, he would have never turned to the dark side, and the whole galaxy would be saved. So it wouldn't have made for an interesting movie or sequel, but once again, if we can just center women, we can save so many lives. With that, I want to jump into NCJW. I'm going to share a little bit about my story, a little bit about our work, and I think the most important lesson I had this year in hope and celebration, because I think we need a little of that. The reason I'm so proud to work at National Council of Jewish Women is because our work every day is surrounding kavod habriot, the dignity of every human being. And this was a key tenet important to me and that I learned from my family really early in my life. A lot of you have heard me say this. When I was young, I learned firsthand that our society isn't always built around dignity or care for women, children, and families. My mother's multiple sclerosis had come out of remission when I was still in high school, leading her to be in a wheelchair and significant medical debt. A lot of roadblocks were suddenly present in my family's life. My mom had to stop working because of the MS. My dad had to stop working to take care of my mom. We didn't have the resources to navigate this change, and it felt like there weren't policies in place to help our family in a time of need. And overnight, we learned that almost nothing in my mom's life was accessible. Not her favorite coffee shop, not our home, not even our synagogue, which is why I was very proud to walk down the ramp on the way in here today. And when it feels like every part of society is built for anybody but you, it's really hard to engage. And day after day, my mom showed me that you don't need to stand on two legs to stand up for yourself. From doctor's office to grocery stores, she spoke out about her MS and the responsibility of leaders to make our spaces accessible for everyone. And the leaders my mom spoke to didn't always make the changes that they should have, right? They didn't. But she spoke out for the changes she deserved, and it inspired me to first engage in disability inclusion and then engage in LGBTQ inclusion, which then led to gender justice, which eventually led me to National Council of Jewish Women. And I'm really honored to get to fight for women, children, and families every single day. And it's why I care so much about our communities being designed to make life easier, to not intentionally put stumbling blocks out before us. And I think it's fair to say that we all have stories like mine, a time when someone we love experienced difficulty that policy only amplified instead of helped. Whether they're personal to you or in your wider community, in your local school, in your synagogue, these are the people that we center when we do our work. And this is a room full of people who already care to fix the inequities in our midst. And we know there's so much for us to work on because our country is broken. People are suffering, and we must do better. And so since I traveled on Amtrak here from Washington, D.C., where I help people do better, as Ruth reminds, that we have to keep reminding our elected officials, I really want to be clear about the state of our country and why we're in the state that we're in. It is a policy decision that millions of children are living in poverty. It is a policy decision that millions of families are living paycheck to paycheck. It is a policy decision that millions of people could be forced to be pregnant and could be forced to give birth. It is a policy decision that people don't have access to clean, drinkable water. It is a policy decision that 25% of women return to work within only 10 days of giving birth because we don't require paid family leave. It is a policy decision that 50% of families in this country don't have access to childcare. And it is a policy decision that gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children in this country. Things are really grim right now, and so much is at stake, but it doesn't have to be this way. A moral America is worth fighting for. And all of you here today who continuously choose to show up, to engage, and to fight for what's right will set our communities, our states, and our country on the path that it must go on. We can't allow our rights to diminish any further, and we can't pretend like our rights in this state is normal. We need to continue to take threats from politicians here and in Israel like they are real, and we need to organize every single day. But I told you I was going to give you some hope. I know I just didn't. But I do have hope. I wouldn't do this work if I didn't have hope. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you how hard it is to find joy, especially when you're deep in this work and see the suffering. I feel that at times. There's rampant anti-Semitism, racism, transphobia, violence, and hate right out in the public. It's not even in hiding. But we have to find joy because it gives us the hope we need to carry on, and it allows us to move forward. And it also means we have to intentionally plan for it. So let me give you a Jewish learning and a learning from my work in the coalition space in Washington, D.C. So I learned this from Rabbi Ari Lucas in New Jersey about Miriam. For those of you who are still in Passover minds, wasn't that long ago, and the importance of planning for joy, in particular thinking about the Exodus from Egypt. So just picture this with me for a minute. You are all now Miriam. You find out it is time to leave Egypt, and you have to go in a hurry. No time for the bread to rise, right? What do you grab? Your kids, I would hope. Maybe something sentimental. I certainly hope, yeah? A few valuables, hopefully some comfortable shoes, one or two other things at most, right? Did you say a tambourine or a timbrel? Nope. That's not what I would have thought either, but Miriam did. In fact, according to the Midrash, or legend, she brought more than one of these percussion instruments with her for the long journey ahead through the desert. And I find it surprising. And I think what we can learn from this is that Miriam had so much faith in the future that she planned to have joy and to have a celebration. And if she hadn't brought this collection of instruments, she might not have been able to lead the Israelites in joyous song during their harrowing escape from the Egyptians. And without that joyous celebration, they may never have been able to move forward at all. They needed to mark their new space, and they needed to celebrate the collective motion forward together. I think Miriam's so underrated in our story. She had the emotional intelligence, compassion, and foresight necessary to help an entire nation move into their new stage. And I saw this lesson in action this past year when I was invited to this massive party right after now Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court. Sister SCOTUS, an organization dedicated to increasing the presence of Black women in our courts, alongside National Women's Law Center and a few others, did not wait to throw the celebration until Justice Jackson was confirmed, but in fact celebrated the accomplishment of her nomination. It was an historic day, and they chose to mark it with a beautiful party for everyone who worked toward the moment. They didn't know at this time whether she would be confirmed or not, but they wanted to celebrate how far they had come and mark the occasion, right? We didn't know if she was gonna end up in the role that she's in. So too often, we're so focused on crossing into the promised land that we don't pause to honor our progress. We don't celebrate our incremental accomplishments. We don't really have enough faith that the future will be brighter, and we don't plan to bring our timbrels. But we can learn from Miriam, and we can learn from Sister SCOTUS to get your timbrels out and celebrate the change each and every time it happens. This is how we're going to sustain ourselves to build a more just world. And this is the lesson I brought back from my staff, because we usually feel defeated in certain moments. We didn't win. We didn't get to the end goal. People still don't have access to reproductive rights. People still don't have equal pay, the long list of things I just shared. But there are moments each and every month, each and every day, each and every year that we can hold on to as a sign of success heading us in the right direction, going down the path towards justice. So if I reflect on the things I'm most proud of from this past year for National Council of Jewish Women, I'll share 3, and then I'm going to wrap up. After the fall of Roe, which is just devastating, as Ruth shared, we were already in the planning process of that moment and what might happen. And we launched the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access as soon as the leaked Roe opinion hit last May, literally almost a year ago, in about a week or two. And we raised $1 million, mostly from small donations from people around the country, that has helped us help 10,000 people access immediate abortion care, particularly traveling over state line, getting the care they need, staying in hotels, paying their travel. 10,000 individuals that collectively people helped. And I'm both proud of it and I'm devastated that we have to do it, but I'm proud that we helped. 2 is that we mobilized the Jewish community all year long on this issue, from the Jewish Rally for Abortion Justice, which brought 4,000 people to Washington, D.C., to Repro Shabbat a few months ago, where more than 1,500 communities across the country participated, including here. And then we worked on critical legislation. When you know you can't pass reproductive rights legislation and the cards are stacked against you, you try to make other things work, right? This was the moment we passed the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, something that kept getting tabled for 13, 14, 15 years, which gives basic accommodations to pregnant people in the workplace. We passed the Pump Act to make sure people have accommodations for breastfeeding in the workplace. And of course, we helped write and pass the Violence Against Women's Act this year, which was really important after being tabled for several years. I'm really proud of those things, and we can give those a round of applause. So I'll share the other thing that gives me hope, and then I promise I'm done. I think back to the civil rights movement and a really grim time. Mamie Till had just lost her son, who was brutally, brutally murdered. And in a last-minute decision, she opens the casket for Emmett Till. And because she made that decision to open the casket, that picture showed up in newspapers all around the country. And a woman in Montgomery saw the picture and for the first time decided to sign up for an organizing training, had never done it before, could have turned inward, could have hid, and literally 100 days later, Rosa Parks changed the course of history. And I think about this because I used to teach 4th grade in Brooklyn. And when we taught Rosa Parks, we taught the fake story, right? She was tired at the end of the long day. I'm sure she was tired and I'm sure it was a long day, but that's not what happened. She was a trained organizer who showed up to a local church and got the training she needed. She was the 4th or 5th woman to do the same thing. She was the first one to have it picked up by the media. There was someone before her who was too young, someone before her who was too pregnant, someone before her who was considered too black. She was the perfect combination of what the media needed to see somebody at the end of the long day, and she changed the course of history. And when she went to go sign up for that activist training, she didn't set out to change the world. She set out to do something, to feel she was going to make an impact. And that's what gives me the most hope, because it's not usually the organizations that make the biggest change in this country. It's an individual who happens to be in the right place at the right time because they chose to be in the right place at the right time. And so I have a lot of faith that if people here continue to not lean into despair as a strategy and continue to not get overwhelmed, as Ruth tells us, and to show up and do something, that the ripple effects for change that's needed in this country could happen from somebody right here. And so I really just want to thank you for the holy and important work that you're doing in your local communities every day. And as Troy Darracott shares, joy is an act of resistance, and we need more joy and less oi, everyone. And so may we all lift up those who are marginalized at the center of our stories. May we all plan to bring our timbrels on the journey, and may we all find joy in the progress of our work. And may we all continue to build a world for women, children, and families to thrive. Amen.